Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Caddle, Season 5, Episode 32. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain.
Our very special guest on this episode is Elysabeth Alfano, CEO of VegTech Invest, the advisor to VegTech Plant-Based Innovation and Climate ETF. She's a fellow podcaster, with not one but two, very busy person, weekly podcast, the Plant-Based Business Hour podcast, and she's the voice of sustainability for the New York Stock Exchange, the Upside and Impact Investing for Change podcast. She's an analyst, looks at ag through the lens of finance, new ag technologies, food innovation. You know, she really looks at food innovation with the eye of Benjamins, not bromides. So, man, where did you meet? How did you come across Elysabeth?
Well, actually, I was on a panel with her, I think it was last year. Really enjoyed her energy, enjoyed her comments. She brings to the table, no pun, some great ideas, a different perspective. She's fairly new to the field, but really I think she understands the business, and she always trying to figure out what food innovation actually means to the industry overall. So I like her perspective. So I'm really enjoying. I really enjoyed my first conversation with her. I'm looking forward to this conversation again.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, you sound different. Well, you don't sound different, but your background sounds a bit different.
Exactly.
Which airport are you in right now, and why?
Yes, I think I can see your house from here.
Ah, Mississauga. Yeah, very good.
That's right, exactly. To Pearson Airport, the loveliest airport in the country, I guess. It's not that busy today, actually, but I just spent 36 hours, I guess, in Toronto. I was keynoting an event that was sponsored by RBC, EDC, and MNP. 1, 2, 3.
It's in the kind of the alphabet soup of presenters there.
Yeah. So, keep in mind. So, RBC, a bank, ADC, Export Development Canada, and MNP, and as you know, we're working. Our lab is working with MNP, a great partner of ours, and frankly, it was a great event. You had a bunch of C-suites, not middle management, C-suite folks in the room, people that actually can make a difference. So my talk to them was very high level, hopeful. Obviously, everyone's talking about tariffs. I did not want to, well, I kind of had to talk about the big elephant in the room, but from a very positive perspective, presenting to them some of the opportunities. And I was really honest with them. I actually think this is the wake-up call we all needed as a country. And we're going to come out, I think, stronger. And I do believe that the agri-food sector will be recognized in some very lucrative path moving forward. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done, though.
Just for the audience listening who may or may not be aware, MNP, I think they'd get RBC and EDC, but say a few words about MNP.
MNP is the largest consulting firm in the ag space in Canada. It's based out of Winnipeg. They employ, I believe, about 5,000 people. So it's a big organization. Yeah, right here in Mississauga, I believe they have about, I think 400 people, and downtown Toronto they have about 1,500 people. Wow. So it's a good organization, and they understand the business, the agri-food sector. And so I've been working with MNP for about 20 years, like on and off. But now we have a 5-year contract with them, developing this index. And this morning, of course, I was presenting to the folks our results of the first index, and we spoke about this I think a few months ago on this pod. But I did tell them, listen, I think the future belongs to you, not the government, not to one prime minister, not to one president. Really, if you want to shape things up, it is up to you. Okay, and this is the key message I gave them. Canada has been acting like U.S.'s tenant, and the U.S. has been the landlord. Let's actually flip things around a little bit. That's the invitation that Donald Trump is giving to Canada. And instead of, we've all been tenants, and as a tenant, you want to make your place beautiful, but all that wealth, all that growth goes to the landlord.
Yeah.
Let's stop doing that. Let's stop selling off and focus on the strategy.
Now, you mentioned the index. I'll just remind the listeners who may not remember that episode or that initiative. It's the Canadian Food Sentiment Index. In fact, we had a little sneak peek of the second volume a bit later in the show. And we'll talk about the Canadian Food Sentiment Index a little later and explain a bit more about it. But I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, FYI, a little teaser, the second Food Sentiment Index is coming out May 6th.
May 6th. All right.
May 6th. It was supposed to come out in April, but because of the election, we thought of waiting a little bit.
All right. Mark it in your calendars. And a reminder to everybody, check out our newly refreshed YouTube channel. Lots of AI-generated videos from our back and forth that I finally figured out how to adjust the perspective. So if you're a dermatologist and you've been enjoying that, you've lost out there a little bit, but everybody else, I think, the W for everybody else. And of course, reminder, we'll be together, you and I. We missed each other. I was traveling. You were here.
Yeah. Where were you?
I was in lovely Savannah, Georgia. Yeah. Which I was keynoting an executive summit. And what a great city. I mean, it's the city where I sat in the park on the bench where Tom Hanks sat for his big scene, with the box of chocolates in Forrest Gump. It was shot actually in that park. So beautiful.
Is there an old lady right next to you?
The park, I tell you, if you saw that park and you would recognize it from like 10 movies. Like I recognize from 10 different movies. Very iconic, and it's beautiful, and people are great. So anyway. So like I was saying, we're going to be together actually in the same place at the same time at the Seattle-Toronto show, April 29th to May 1st. Be sure and join us and drop by, give us a wave in our big fishbowl. I noted, by the way, circling back, RC Canada, Restaurants Canada last week, they must have been listening to the podcast. I had my parking issue. I went to the show, couldn't find a place to park. They announced they're moving the show in 2026 to the International Center, which a somewhat less impressive venue, but lots and lots and lots of parking.
But it's accessible.
Very accessible, and by the airport, so you don't get stuck downtown Toronto. Which
Are you in love with the AnCare Center? I'm not in love with that center at all.
I like the layout a little bit.
But I'm not in love with the Palais Congrès in Montreal either. So
right,
right. Well, I think it'll be more intimate for the RC show. Yeah,
it'll be fine. Anyway, so mark your calendars for next year. For those of you who go to that great show, Restaurant Canada show, it'll be moving, moving near the airport. For those of you who don't know where the International Center is. All right, let's get right into the news. Inflation numbers came out, as did the Bank of Canada rate. And at first glance, it's great news for consumers. Canada's inflation, surprisingly, described in Reuters, slows to 2.3% in March. 3 notches below the prior month, clearly helped by gas. But here comes Sylvain to throw tomatoes at that parade.
Exactly. Well, I mean, basically, we learned this week that the Bank of Canada decided to keep its benchmark rate, unsurprisingly. But essentially, the Bank of Canada is basically saying, we don't know what to do, so we'll just keep it as is for now. But what most people didn't talk about is the food inflation rate, which actually jumped to 3.2%. I was expecting a jump, but not to 3.2%. That's a 1.9% jump in a month, which is a record. The last time we saw that was back in 1983.
Wow.
So that was 42 years ago. And nobody was talking about it. And some people were saying, it's the GST holiday. March was a GST holiday-free month. It was the first one this year. I think there's more to it than that. I think costs have gone up. And, of course, I've been visiting some companies, close to where you are in Mississauga the last couple of weeks. And what I'm hearing is that counter-tariffs implemented by Ottawa on ingredients are making the cost to produce food more expensive. And so those are certainly, and of course, the other issue is the pivoting to actually get to source products beyond America when we're seeing this de-Americanization of the store. Well, grocers have to go beyond and look for other products that are outside America, and that typically would cost more. And so I'm a little bit concerned. However, there are some tailwinds for us going into spring or moving into the summer, I guess. The dollar is getting stronger.
Fantastic.
Finally. And oil cost of transportation is down because oil is getting cheaper. Well, essentially because a lot of people think that there's going to be a bit of an economic downturn here. And when that happens, typically energy costs go down. So those are factors that are actually going to help Canadians, I think.
Well, let's continue on one thread about that. We were catch up on some cattle research. You did some research powered by our friends at Caddle about Canadians' willingness to pay a little bit more to avoid American products or to support or go looking. Are these two things correlated? I guess talk about that research you did with Caddle and the findings. We didn't mention it last episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, honestly, I actually sent it out. I sent the results out as a press release. I think it was on a Friday during an election, thinking that nobody would pick it up, and it got picked up a lot, actually. So, and again, it was actually in the National Post today or yesterday. So, essentially, what the story is that Canadians are willing to pay more for Canadian products, 5 to 10%. It's a survey. I know, but 61% is a percentage that we've never seen before. So quite interesting. So people are very motivated. Yeah. And that's kind of what I said to the group this morning. I mean, don't take for granted what's happening right now. I mean, capitalize on this momentum by showcasing your product, by showcasing what is good about your product, because it's not going to last forever. I mean, people will buy local, but they need to be given a reason to buy local beyond just being local. The product has to be good.
Well, and you know, the overarching still number one concern of Canadians, I think, on a day-to-day basis, other than, you know, the political stuff, is affordability, right? The affordability in both America and the U.S. It's the number one issue. So, you know, it's interesting that one for now trumps the other, so to speak. I'll pay more for Canadian, not necessarily pay more on an ongoing basis, B, actually pay more, to your point about what they say they'll do versus what they actually do. But as your point, 61% of people saying they're going to do something, that's pretty good indicator. And I guess the other idea is the way you asked the question, or you and Caddle asked the question, is buy Canadian versus not buy American. In other words, you know, I'm happy to buy strawberries from Mexico or berries from Peru, and pay a bit more or not. I mean, I know the grocers are working super hard to bring in fresh produce and other product from around the world, right?
Oh, it's Canada Day every day at the grocery store. But you're absolutely right. That people are a little bit split between buying Canadian and buying non-American. So it's a bit split here. Absolutely. The one thing that I would notify is this tea policy at Loblaw. People seem to like it. You know, more than like 3 out of 5 Canadians actually appreciate Loblaw's gesture. So that's something that I thought was very interesting. It means that I think people appreciate the transparency.
Yeah,
they may not
for that. That should be warm your heart, because you've been calling for transparency for your entire career, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and
it validates it from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, and I shared results with Loblaw, obviously, because I think it was just a good news story and a good call for them. I don't expect other grocers to follow suit, but I thought it was actually a good move for Loblaw.
Let's not sticking with research. Let's move on to the Canadian Food Sentiment Index. We mentioned it earlier in the episode, sponsored by the great folks at MNP. But tell me and tell the listeners about what its objectives are, and then you can give us maybe a sneak peek of Volume 2, which comes out, May 6th, right?
May 6th, yeah, that's right.
First, tell us about the index, and then what it is and what it's meant to do, and then give us a sneak peek.
Well, essentially, the Food Sentiment Index is a copy of Purdue's Sentiment Index. So we didn't invent anything. They've been doing it for about 4 years now.
And Purdue is, just to be, so that everybody knows, Purdue isn't the chicken farm, it's the university.
Yeah. Well, they're one of the top universities in the U.S. when it comes to ag. The top three I would say Cornell, Purdue, and Texas A&M. Those would be the top three. So you have Purdue doing basically assessing. They do it every month. So it's kind of the Michigan State Consumer Index. You know, it's actually publicized quite a bit. Same thing, but for food, essentially. So we're trying to ask people, well, how do you feel about organics? How do you feel about food safety in Canada? How do you feel about prices? And how do you feel about trusting the food industry? And so I decided this week to come to release that as a teaser, because it's actually a bit of a good news story for the food industry. Compared to last fall, Canadians feel more confident about the food industry in general right now compared to 6 months ago. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, well, most people have pivoted mentally. They've thought they're starting to thinking about other problems than just pricing. They're thinking about Canadian products by Canadian. They want to support them. So everyone across the board is actually benefiting from that momentum.
All right, so let's move on to the next thing. Let's talk about kids and Ozempic. You know, it's funny you brought this up in notes just before we were about to chat and jump on the mic, because it came up in my discussions. I was talking in Savannah about food service trends, retail trends, and a couple of years ago I had talked about this thing, Ozempic Nation. I mean, watch out for its impacts. And in fact, a couple of folks in the audience had heard me prior, or had heard me speak about that before, and actually we're now on Ozempic. Not that the two are connected, and we're like, yeah, it does everything you say it does, and it's having the impact you said it was on QSR, even though QSR is fast growing. Talk about now this latest research and your thinking about food and Ozempic and children and kids.
We don't have new research on the topic, but I don't know how you felt on Monday. I was troubled by the announcement that pediatricians were encouraged to consider GLP-1s for kids, adolescents, for kids age 12 and up. I don't know how you felt, and I did share my thoughts to the group this morning, and frankly, the way I see it is that big pharma is coming in to solve a problem that the food industry has prided itself to try to solve. Because I mean, the food industry is out there providing quality products, healthy products, and here we are, big pharma coming in. You know what? If your child is overweight, we have a solution for you. It has nothing to do with food. It has nothing to do with lifestyle. It's a medication. It made me feel really uneasy, and so we are expecting, based on our numbers, we're expecting 3 million Canadians to be using a GLP-1 drug by 2030.
Wow.
That does not include minors, people under the age of 18. Now, if you open up that window, I don't know exactly how it's going to actually impact the food industry. I was talking to the president of Mondelez Canada this morning. He was actually in the room, and he's obviously a little bit concerned about what's happening right now. And I would say probably it's the same for other CPG companies like Nestle, Pepsi. I mean, you look at all of those shares in the last 2 years; they're all down. Anywhere between 13 to 25%. So you can see that the market is also concerned about those companies' ability to increase their top line as a result of what's happening with GLP-1 drugs.
Now, some would lay any obesity challenges amongst children at several feet. Right? One would be lifestyle, being more active. Two would be social media and the power of these big platforms to just keep you glued to a screen. The third would be big food. I mean, between different beverages and different snacks, many people might say that they're a contributor. What's your perspective on that? You're saying that big pharma is coming in to solve a problem that these guys, some would say, created in part, no?
Well, that's the thing. I think it will probably implicitly raise the issue. And I'm concerned about the image of the industry. But, I mean, let's face it, I'm concerned about the industry's ability to sell. I mean, if people are eating less, I mean, maybe people need to eat less. So I'm not saying it's such a bad thing, but it's just, I don't know, it's the message. I've always believed that lifestyle is a big factor, but obesity is a complex issue. I'm not a medical doctor myself. I always look at things through the lens of the food industry. But to be honest, I think we've reached a point where people are scratching. A lot of people are scratching their heads right now. Is this the right thing to do for kids?
Okay. let's leave it there for now. Let's get to our interview with Elysabeth. But first, we're going to hear from our great sponsors at Caddle. Does your digital customer engagement strategy need a serious upgrade? Enter Caddle, Canada's consumer insights powerhouse with the largest, most active panel of everyday shoppers. They're not your typical sponsor. They're the voice of the consumer, always in the know on the hottest trends and shaping what's next. So why Caddle? They go beyond consumer insights. They're trailblazing the future of ratings and reviews and leading the charge in user-generated content with unmatched syndicated receipt data and the ability to gather reviews across any category. Caddle partners with giants like Walmart, Canadian Tire to deliver results that count. Visit askcaddle.com now for an exclusive The Food Professor podcast listener discount on your first review or research campaign today. That's askcaddle.com.
All right, we are pleased today to be joined by Elysabeth Alfano, CEO of VegTech Invest and consultant in the food industry, a veteran. I met her, I believe it was a few months ago, and absolutely fell in love with her style, her energy. So pleased to have you on, Elysabeth.
Great. So happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you are in beautiful Mexico today, right?
Oh, I am. I'm about 50 minutes north of Puerto Vallarta, and it is dreamy.
I'm in, yes, very rainy Halifax, and Michael is from,
sunny,
Toronto. Sunny,
cold.
yeah.
Sunny but cold.
Anyways, Mexico is great, but I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. So tell us a little bit about you and how you became CEO of VegTech in about, I don't know, a minute.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe I'll start with what VegTech Invest is.
Yeah,
most
absolutely.
people hear that and they think, oh, it's a venture capital fund. We are not. We believe that the only way to shift food systems is to attract Wall Street. 91% of all investment dollars come through Wall Street. Only 9 to 10% go through the startup world. So we invest in publicly traded companies, the large multinational companies that are good actors. There are good large companies out there, and we do our research to find those and put together a fund of those good actor, innovative companies pushing the needle on food systems transformation. And that is our fund, publicly traded on the international markets. So that's what VegTech Invest is. And I'm the CEO of that, along with Dr. Sasha Goodman, who's portfolio manager for our ETF product, which is in the market. And I came to be CEO because I came to found the company with Dr. Sasha Goodman because I wanted to invest with liquidity, which means getting in and getting out. You know, once you invest in a startup, you're never going to see that money again. And most likely they'll have no impact. You know, that tiny, small company, if it makes it, and most likely it won't make it, 99% of startups fail. But if it does make it, it'll take a very long time for any kind of impact. Whereas if you're investing in a publicly traded company that already has distribution channels, that impact can be almost immediate, 6 months to a year. So we decided that we wanted to invest ourselves in those companies that we can, invest 1 week, get out the next week, this kind of liquidity. Right. We wanted this flexibility and we wanted this kind of impact. So I couldn't find anything. Nothing existed. So that's when we created VegTech Invest, which is the company that produces the food systems transformation ETF in the public markets.
And VegTech was created when exactly?
Oh my gosh, the tail end of 2021, but we hit the market in 2022 with our product.
Okay, that's great. Now, you've been vocal about the plant-based sector needing a reset. And I know in the plant-based world, lots of people are looking at food very differently. So to you, what does a reset actually look like?
I don't know if I would actually call it a reset. I think I'm focusing on other aspects of the industry than others. So there's been a big push on startups and better taste, better quality, et cetera. I actually don't think this is really where the big shift will come from. I think it's more getting the industry players and policymakers to put forth change from their large scale perspective. And then once you have, large multinational companies with an advertising budget telling consumers that it's more manly to eat plants and have better blood flow to all areas of the body, then you see consumers doing that. So I think my focus is less on waiting for consumers to go against everything they've ever known and suddenly pick up a completely new behavior. That's not my focus. I'm more interested in the companies that can shift and move the needle quickly and bring consumers along with them.
So interesting, just the investment philosophy and the guidelines. So let me ask you a couple of questions about when you're evaluating the companies to put in your shopping basket, so to speak. How do you discern between actual innovation and short-term hype? I mean, there's just a giant distortion field around a lot of what happens coming out of Wall Street, just to work on the stock price, not true customer innovation. And the second part, and maybe this is a follow-up to just what you were talking about, got me intrigued, because I do think there's a customer-driven movement happening, and that's the Ozempic movement. So if you could first talk about kind of your evaluation lens around understanding true innovation. And then second, are you starting to turn your mind to, are companies starting to think about this, if you think it is a thing, this whole movement towards Ozempic and weight loss?
Yeah, got so much to unpack there. So hopefully we've got several hours. Everyone pull up their chairs and get comfy. So real innovation, I would say, is we're looking for those companies that have an IP moat. So something that is protectable, intellectual property that is their own. And then we start to look for, financial stability, path to profitability, these kind of measures that will protect the innovation that they have. Again, these larger scale companies actually have R&D budgets, whereas, the small ones don't have anything. So should they put their mind to innovation, these larger publicly traded companies, it can happen really quickly. Yeah. So
is one element of that innovation buying startups? Like, you don't invest in startups for your fund, but I've found that the larger companies more often now are buying innovation rather than having it as an inherent capability within their four walls. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah. Fastest path to change, right? Just acquire what you don't have. You've got the budget. Just go get it. Again, this is why we like the big players. They have this kind of muscle power. So we're seeing that a lot. In fact, I just got off a call with one of my clients, because I am a consultant as well, a large multinational food ingredient company. And we were going over the options for M&A and what we're looking at to, I'm helping them with a strategy for acquiring the innovation so that they don't have to spend the time or money figuring it out themselves. They'll just go acquire it, and then they can immediately implement. So we're talking about fast impact for those who are listening on the call interested in sustainability. Very fast impact here.
Yeah, interesting. Doesn't always work out though, right? I mean, look at what happened with Unilever and Ben and Jerry's, to pick a very public break in terms of, we wanted you for one thing, now you're really actually that thing, so we don't really want you anymore. Do you see that happen often? Do the founder mentality versus the corporate sometimes breaks the innovation chain? What do you think?
100%. It's not always a match made in heaven. Sometimes they say outwardly that they're buying innovation, but really they're squashing innovation. The path to the finish
innovation
line.
Capture.
Yes, exactly right. So it's not always successful, but it's the best chance of success. So even though there is attrition in the M&A of those that work and those that don't, if ultimately these companies are driven by the bottom line, and we are in a situation where we need to feed more people more nutritiously in a shorter amount of time, using fewer resources and creating less damage.
Do you see that often? I mean, Pepsi just bought a probiotic drink, right? What is it? Yep. They spent, $1 billion. It's not like they couldn't have developed that themselves. What are they buying there? Are they buying that space on the shelf? Again, not like they couldn't buy that. Or are they just kind of muscling out a potential, one listing on a shelf somewhere? Not speaking to that one specifically, but is this what you're talking about in terms of sometimes burying success or burying innovation?
No, I think in that case, it's not about buying shelf space, because if anybody can afford shelf space, it is Pepsi, and they certainly have a lot of it. But I would say in that case, why spend your time and resources trying to figure something out? If something is working, just buy it. Just buy it while you can, just bet on your better virtual horses, so to speak.
Right. And let's comment on Ozempic, and then I just want to talk about alternative proteins get back to that, which is Sylvain's last question. I'll pass the mic back to Sylvain. But do you find that companies are trying to be innovative around, creating craveability for a completely different appetite?
100%. Really 100%. And I don't know how much I would say that this is consumer driven. It was sort of pharmaceutical driven, and then consumers got hold of it and it really took fire. Yes, I'm seeing, again, I'm a consultant in the space to the food industry, and I'm seeing many companies start to launch complete product lines based on Ozempic, GLP-1, and fostering that and mitigating its damage. So there's a lot of hair loss, for example, for women with GLP-1. So now products are coming out to address that. Oh, sure. It's not all smooth sailing with Ozempic. So, I'm seeing that take hold for sure.
Let's talk about the role of policy and governments. I know in the U.S. There's been a lot of chatter about RFK Jr.'s arrival in cabinet and his talk about healthier products. The change in tone, I guess, coming from Washington, do you think that's going to have an impact, not just in the United States, but globally? The focus on ingredients, the focus on labels and what goes into our food. Do you think that discussion is slowly evolving?
I think it's quickly evolving. Now, the health and wellness trend has been around for a while, and that's been on the uptrend significantly. But here, RFK lands on the scene at a time when health and wellness was already ripe. I think of three buckets for the consumer: those who get it, those who don't get it, and those who have to get it. So for health reasons, they must switch. So not focusing on the bucket of those who aren't going to get it or don't want to change or whatever. Okay, that leaves you two big buckets, and there's a lot of market share there. So these two buckets have been driving health and wellness, and with RFK, pushing the media towards this, I think what you're doing is bringing this to the mass public attention, which is great for the whole sector. Now, how much of that's going to be gibberish, blah, blah rhetoric that, right? I mean, we have no idea who we're dealing with there.
It's a bit of a mixed cocktail. On the one hand, it's vaccine skepticism. On the other hand, it's actually healthy eating. So it's tough, right?
I don't even know that I would say it's healthy eating. I mean, he did his last interview from a Shake Shack eating French fries.
They're in beef tallow. Come on, they're in beef tallow. It solves everything, right?
Exactly.
These French fries, it's not like we're talking about whole potatoes here. These are, the most processed kinds of food you can have, basically potato flour. So, this is why I say we don't know what it's rhetoric, but I will say what's much more important than the headline grabbing RFK is trade wars are a very short jump to wars over food and water. So if you stop trading with your trading partners, you start to have your food cut off, because right now all countries trade internationally to get enough food. China, look at China, 1.4 billion people, only 7% of their land is arable meaning farmable, cannot feed 1.4 billion people on 7% arable land. They must rely on the US and others. So you start cutting off food, you're going to see this enormous urgent need, as in today and tomorrow, for food independence. This makes food security an issue of national security for countries around the globe, which means government policy, which you'd asked me about, is going to start spending on food innovation and has already begun. So you look at the U.S. Department of Defense spending 35% of its R&D budget from the bioindustrial program on food innovation. Now that's a program that would have usually been spent on like chemical warfare, et cetera. 1/3, 35% going to food innovation. 1/3 going to material innovation, and 1/3 going to actual weaponry. So, in China, 2020, they started investing in food innovation in their 5-year plan. Middle East, obviously, you look at the Middle East, Israel and other countries concerned about water. Now, one of the leading usages of clean water is the food industry, specifically animal agricultural driven. So you're going to have deep innovation coming very quickly, I think, throughout the world, and policy to follow.
Mm-hmm. So my guess, and I'll throw it back to Michael to close things off. My sense, just hearing you don't feel overly confident by what's happening in Washington, the tariff wars, and everything that's going on with Canada, Mexico, China, India. You're not overly reassured by what's going on.
Oh, I don't think it's strong economic policy to induce trade wars. And, I also don't know how much of this is going to be rhetoric. It might be threats, and then pulled at the last minute. So we will have to see what takes shape. But I don't think this is great precedent. However, I think it's an incredible investment opportunity for food innovation. So for us at VegTech Invest in the public markets, we see these large multinational companies just spinning for innovation to quickly address this need. So I don't want to be callous and say that it's, money and money only. But if you're looking for investment opportunities, I think it's going to really quickly speed up food innovation and food systems transformation by necessity.
When I think about reflecting on what you're saying about food independence at a national level, Sylvain has often talked about a country like Singapore, who's really leading in terms of being self-sufficient, small little island. I mean, they're the perfect example of we can't grow what we need in a conventional sense, but they're exploring some very innovative things. What other countries for you come to mind around food independence and sustainability in food?
Sure thing. Let me just comment on Singapore. So Singapore currently producing 10% of its own food. It must import 90%. They have something called 30 by 30. They're pushing for food innovation such that they can make 30% of their own food by 2030, still leaving them 70% shy. So while Singapore is an excellent example, very forward on cultivated meat, precision fermentation, I don't know the audience of this podcast if I use words like precision fermentation, if that's going to make sense to anyone. So we can stop and define those if we need. Okay, 100%. Everybody knows. Biomass fermentation, alternative proteins in microalgae, fungi, et cetera. They're very advanced on this, and the government really behind it. Israel really leading in innovation more than any other country, I would say. Again, you look at the political dynamics of the Middle East and you quickly see, wow, you better make sure you've got enough food and water. So Israel really leading. Now, in Europe, I would say Denmark and Holland have been very forward. Strong university in the Netherlands. I won't produce the name starting with a W because it's very long and I would butcher it. But very, very much government policy leading there. And the same with Denmark now imposing the first really meat tax. So they imposed recently taxes on acquiring any new calf or cow to be growing for beef. So, and it was 100 pounds, I believe, per animal. So I think these are very forward-looking nations. Now, Canada, as I learned on my podcast, a little shout out to the Plant-Based Business Hour, Sylvain was on my podcast. We talked about how Canada is so forward-looking with its natural pulses that it has and produces and exports. So, I would say Canada and the U.S. could do much more, obviously, I think.
Agree.
I mean, when we think about Canada, Sylvain and I have been talking about, particularly in the political context we're living in today, that Canada should be a superpower. Going back to the beginning of your conversation, we're a vast nation that produces more food than we need. That should put us in a global advantage from many perspectives. So, pay attention to what's happening here because there's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen.
There are, but if I could just quickly comment on that, it's the same for the U.S. So when people tell me, oh my gosh, I just went to Costco. What do you mean there's a food systems problem? Everything looks great at Costco, and same in Canada. Oh my God, we have more food than we ever need. But the rest of the world won't. And people tend to not sit around when they don't have food and water. They go to where there is food and water. That would be the US and Canada. So this is why it's an issue of national security, because you don't want this kind of geopolitical instability. The globe has to be a safe and secure place. Otherwise, it's bad for all. And this is why this is becoming a policy crisis.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, I'm going to ask you a couple last fire round questions, or I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions, get your response to them. Hyped, overhyped, or just about the right amount of hype? And you touched on my first one, which is, whether it's precision fermentation, but let's talk about lab-grown meat. On paper, looks like a big solution. It's still being made at the test tube level. Singapore has approved it. What do you think? Hyped, overhyped, or just it's real?
Frustration. Can I add my own category?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I say frustration because that innovation's like 8 to 10 years away. Why aren't we focusing on the innovation we have right now? It's a right now problem. And that's plant-based and precision fermentation and biomass fermentation. So perhaps I got ahead of myself and I'm answering the forward-coming questions. But I mean, I don't like to punt the ball 10 years out for innovation that hasn't yet been determined at scale. I want it to happen. I think it will happen. I think it's actually a necessity to happen, and more innovation dollars will pour in. Meanwhile, we have trade wars starting tomorrow. We have food independence and food security issues today, not to mention natural resource biodiversity problems galore. So, it's sort of, it's a distraction that bothers me because it forces everyone to look elsewhere when we need to be focusing on today.
Insect protein.
No. Oh my God. Insect protein. This always... Oh, I'm speaking a little callously for your audience. I apologize if this is abrupt for anyone, but when people bring up insect protein, it makes me think like, are you actually gunning for the Darwin Award? When you look at the United Nations, the top 2 reasons for the next pandemic, not the one we're still in now, in the sense that we're experiencing quantitative tightening because we had so much quantitative easing because of COVID. So not this pandemic, but the next one's all related to the intensification of animal factories. Now, you think of animals living butt to snout in their own feces, and it's not a surprise that they're an extreme pandemic risk. Now, you think of that for pigs and, 1,000-pound cow. Now you're talking about multiplying exponentially the number of complete microorganisms that would live and connect in their own feces together by an enormous amount. How are you going to contain that spread of disease? And it has been historically the lack of humility of scientists to think that they can control nature, and it never fully does. I think that is a true humanitarian risk.
Michael, I don't think Elizabeth is sold on crickets yet.
I was going to say no cricket factories for in your
Elizabeth, the largest cricket farm in the world is in London, Ontario, Canada. Oh, yeah.
Good luck, people. Good luck.
It's feeding our pets. Well, it brings me to my last one, which is biosecurity, avian flu. I mean, it's hitting the cost of your eggs, as you would know, not you because you're in Mexico, but U.S. more than Canada. But, this biosecurity issue around animals, have we got past it, or are that just the modern... It feels like one of the reasons that, we've got an ag secretary telling people to get their own chickens, which to me sounds like a biosecurity risk more than a benefit. But what do you think?
This is just an extension of the cricket conversation, and I didn't spout on this because you'd asked me to be brief, but, mad cow disease, avian bird flu, African swine fever, this is the result of animals living butt to snout in intensified situations. And so I just did a paper on this on LinkedIn, and I'll share it with you guys. You look at avian bird flu, it's been around since, I want to say, the 90s in Asia, then going to Europe, then coming to the United States. It's been 3+ decades now, almost 4. We haven't been able to eradicate it. It's finally jumped from bird to cow to human. What more do you need to say this system isn't working for us? So I find that until we are willing to grow, which we can do through precision fermentation, eggs in a controlled setting that doesn't need the animal and doesn't need the factory scenario, we are at risk, stupidly at risk.
Where can our listeners go to get in touch with you? Or you mentioned LinkedIn, or read more of your work, or you've got a podcast, and then tell us all about how to get in touch and where to go find your stuff.
That's wonderful. Thanks for that. Of course, come find me on LinkedIn. I am always there, and that is an easy place. You can also reach out to me at info@VegTechInvest.com. Those actually do come directly to me. So if you'd like more information on my podcasts, I do an investing podcast called Upside and Impact, Investing for Change. I also do the Plant-Based Business Hour. You can find those on iTunes. But if you want to chat or you have any questions or you'd like to talk about investing, any of this great stuff, come find me on LinkedIn or info@VegTechInvest.com.
Actually, I have a question for you. When do you sleep?
Oh my word. I'm a colossal sleeper. I sleep 9 hours a night. No, I'm a champion sleeper. Yes, it's really important to me.
Well, good for you. That's great.
I know.
Okay, that's the next follow-up question. Oh my goodness, how with so many ideas in your head that you can get 9 hours of sleep. Congratulations.
Oh yeah, I just go right out. It's amazing.
Listen, Elysabeth, thanks so much for joining Sylvain and I on the Food Professor podcast. Real treat to hear your voice and tap into your wisdom. And I wish you much continued success in the fund and in your consulting work. And thanks for joining us on the pod.
This has been great. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
All right, we are back. A couple of quick things to finish us off with. Did you see this news? And I wanted your perspective on it because I was not understanding if this was unusual or just usual and happened at a certain time. So there's word in the news that China placed some pretty big orders for Brazilian soybeans. Now, we talked about this before, that one of the options for China in a tariff battle that they're with in the U.S. would be soybeans, and soybeans sourced from Brazil. So it was making the bit of the news when I was down there that, oh my God, did you see the size of the big order that China placed? But then I read a few more articles that said, yeah, this time of the year, they're always placing big orders from Brazil. And it's just the kind of cycle, but it's just a little more happenstance than intention. What would be your impression?
Well, I mean, China's been undermining the U.S. for quite some time now. I think it's really started during the second year of Biden's administration, really. America is having a hard time selling to China, and Brazil is China's way out, essentially. So in a nutshell, Brazil has become China's breadbasket, really, like breadbasket. So, yeah, no, absolutely. And China, of course, as we all know, there are high geopolitical tensions between China and the U.S. So if they can buy elsewhere, they will buy elsewhere. They want to show that they don't need America,
sure,
and vice versa. And so,
but at this time of the year, they're doing that anyway. Right. So there's nothing actually inherently unusual about buying a lot of soybeans from Brazil at this time of the year. There's other things that China is doing, like restricting rare minerals and all kinds of other, not buying Boeing jets. But this thing was going to happen anyway. It just kind of happened at the same time, right?
It's not unusual to see Brazil selling more soybeans in particular to China this time of year. Absolutely.
Okay. Now sticking with the U.S., I wonder if you saw this, that the Trump administration had canceled a $3 billion climate-friendly farming program. That's a big move, right? Or is it?
Absolutely. I've been hearing rumblings from different groups in the U.S. about this. They were anticipating it. They're not happy. Many groups are owed money. They've invested in solar energy, for example, for their farms and things like that. So a lot of these programs cover some infrastructure, additions and for farms. And so a lot of people are not happy at all. And that's really Trump's base. Really, so a lot of people feel betrayed.
All right, well, let's end on a happier note. Did you see Tim Hortons launched a new protein coffee? Did you catch that?
I did not see that. No.
So they've got a new coffee, and they're getting into the the enhanced coffee with a protein. What do you think of the overall initiative for a big chain like that? It's funny, when I first was working with Tim Hortons, going all the way back to Roll Up the Rim. I remember we were showing them I was with the cup company, and we were showing them a lid that was like for cappuccinos. And they were like, We're not the cappuccino company. We make coffee.
Yeah,
that's it. And now they're talking protein coffee. Is this a thing where people are drinking more kind of enhanced beverages, not just a coffee, but I want a protein coffee?
It's funny.
It's going after kids, I guess, right? Not kids, but it's going after younger people thinking more about these things.
I'm not surprised, to be honest. I won't tell you which company, but I got into a conversation recently with a company thinking about merging products like butter and coffee, to blend into coffee so people can. Apparently, if you use both, you can actually feel better and your gut health gets better as well.
Come on.
So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
That's
so people,
amazing.
when they think about coffee, they think about health in general. So I'm not surprised to hear this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of these initiatives actually in the future.
Yeah, I like it from an innovation perspective. I don't know how much they're going to sell of it, but it's interesting. It's innovative. So shout out to our friends at Tim Hortons. All right.
Yeah.
Now, don't forget, dial into our new radio show, Bite Sized, in the Chorus Network.
Bite-sized.
We're on the weekends, and it started last week. We had our first episode. I don't know how it went because I didn't get any numbers yet, but I know that it's fun listening to it on the radio, even though we listen to ourselves.
Did you listen to yourself?
Well, I was very curious to see how they merged it all together and what the ads were.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it all came together quite nicely, and
I understand they edited all the swear words though.
Yeah, they yeah. I forgot that you can't cuss on national radio, but there you go.
They'll lose their license.
I got to get used to that. All right, well, let's leave it there. I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer growth advocate, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois, and I am at an airport right now.
Well, safe travels to you, my friend, back home. Safe travels to everyone listening as well.
Take care.